blue line. Almost. Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ and Friends. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and my friend today has been on the show before. She's a very accomplished chef and cookbook author. Her name is Cathy Grazzini, and she has a brand new book called Love the Foods That Love the Planet. And she's going to be making a recipe from the book, which I can't pronounce, so we're just going to call it Middle Eastern eggplant stew. Please welcome Cathy back to the show. It's so nice to see you in the kitchen because I remember one time you were on, I think your kitchen was being remodeled or something.
That's right. Well, last time we couldn't work in this space because it was completely up in the air. But yes, this is my new kitchen. I adore it. I bow to my husband every time I'm in here because he did all the work, and it's really phenomenal. Everything I want.
Well, congratulations on the new book. This is your second book, right?
Correct. Thank you. Yes. Yes. Thanks so much. This is an environmentally focused book. Yeah. So it's all to help all of us because the planet is really crying out for help right now. And it's a very empowering message that I'm hoping to convey about how much agency we have, what a big difference we can make as home cooks to really lower our climate footprint in our kitchens and help the planet alleviate some of the pressures that it's facing right now.
Well, thank you for writing it. So, I have to ask you because I have a PDF of it, but I see your book right there, which I hope you'll show to the audience and hold up and maybe show some of the beautiful photos your husband took. But I'm curious, that thing on the cover, it looks mouth-wateringly delicious to me. I thought it was maybe a polenta stack. What is that? And maybe
no, a lot of people do make that assumption because it could be. But this is a traditional, all the recipes, not all the recipes, many of the recipes in the book, I take as inspiration from home cooking traditions from all over the world. So you'll find recipes from Denmark and Japan and West Africa and, all over Mexico, of course. But this particular recipe is causa rellena. It's Peruvian, and it's got a whole history that I talk about in the book itself. Causa means cause, and this in the 19th century there was a war between Peru and its neighbors, and the women were trying to support their boys on the field, so they wanted to create a cold dish that they could pack up and take with them while they were marching and fighting. And it's made with potatoes, not polenta. So that's what's and chilies that are native there, but potatoes are in the Andes is that's a native crop for that part of South America. And ají amarillo are these beautiful orange chilies that colored the potato dish. And it's stuffed with, instead of fish, because originally it was stuffed and layered with fish, it's another recipe from this cookbook, which is my crabless crab meat salad, which is made from sustainably grown hearts of palm. So causa rellena.
Your food is just so delicious. You've had to have had formal training, Cathy, right, to make recipes?
Yeah, I did have some training at Ruby. I did their professional plant-based program back in 2015 or so. But it was enormously liberating to me because it filled in a lot of gaps that I had and, just gave me the confidence to really experiment and do my own thing and take it from there. So I love that program and I heartily recommend it to anybody who's serious about. And they have a lot of different programs. Some of them are not as involved as a 6-month or longer commitment to because it's intensive, but they have all different levels. So it's just a great outfit and wonderful people. But I've always learned I'd love to cook, and I lived in Italy for several years with that's where I met my husband over there. And we went back, we lived here, we lived there, we did that kind of thing for a couple of years. And that was a wonderful education as well in the home kitchens of just Tuscan cooks. They weren't plant-based by a long shot, and nor was I completely at that stage of my life in my 20s. But it was wonderful home cooking traditions using fresh produce, lots of herbs. And, I learned a great deal there as well. So, yeah, and it's just a passion that I have. It's the way I express my love.
How long have you been following a plant-based diet, and what was your original impetus to start one?
Back again in 2013, 14, my husband had a real medical scare, as so many people enter this realm in that way. We had been vegetarian, actually, for like 30 years. We had seen films about animal agriculture and slaughter and way back when, and it was like, that was enough to turn our stomachs a long, long time ago. But we certainly had dairy, and we ate eggs, and we had plenty of olive oil and so forth. And Giordano, my husband, who took he's a photographer as well. He had a year from hell, a healthy guy, a cyclist in his 50s, and he just had so much inflammation going on in his body. He had all his systems were just rebelling in a major way. He had a year of many infections, unrelated, just systemically, and it culminated with a blockage in one of his arteries. That we didn't realize that's what it was. We thought it was they all thought it was just a crimp from a biking accident in his artery that feeds the carotid under his collarbone. But anyway, he had a surgery for that when it became necessary. And it was a scary surgery because the next day they had to replace a part of his artery. The graft didn't hold, and he started bleeding. I won't go into details, but anyway, it was an emergency secondary surgery. By the time he did survive it, but barely. And by the time we got home and realized that he had advanced atherosclerosis, that was our wake-up call. And we our physicians locally didn't know anything about anything plant-based, and the surgeon said, we can fix you up anytime. But it was a pretty traumatic experience. We didn't want to go through that again. And that's where I discovered the work of dear Caldwell Esselstyn Jr. and Dean Ornish, who were working with Bill Clinton, and had all that success with heart patients through dietary and lifestyle measures. And we flipped overnight, and I went back to school and got certified in plant-based nutrition, did the Ruby program, was trained as a Food for Life instructor with PCRM. I just sort of changed our whole world, because I realized if this was, I wanted Giordano to be around as long as he could be, and he made an amazing recovery at changing our lifestyle. Not only reversed his block, I mean, his plaque quieted down, opened up, his arteries began to reverse their advancement of towards with plaque formation, but all manner of other niggly inflammatory related ailments that we thought were just part of aging and middle age, they disappeared, like they do for so many other people. And we weren't heavy, but we always carried around a little extra weight, and all of that just dissipates when you're eating such a high fiber, high nutrient, low fat, plant-based approach to things. So that was our original introduction to this way of living.
That's fantastic. So you talked about low fat, so I'm guessing you don't use oil in your recipes. And what about
No.
things like sugar, salt? Where do you stand on those?
Yeah. No sugar, no refined sweeteners, no oils or added fats, just what's in the produce themselves, and in the whole grains, legumes, mushrooms, lots of herbs and spices, because they're so packed with polyphenols and antioxidants. They're so anti-inflammatory. All the vegetables and fruits in the plant kingdom, that's pretty much what we rely on. I do use miso paste instead of salt, because research has shown that it actually has heart benefits. It helps to lower blood pressure. It lowers our heart rate. So at least that's what the human studies coming out of Japan have indicated. So all the recipes in this cookbook, and my original cookbook, Love the Foods That Love You Back, are all seasoned. If they have miso, that would be instead of salt, if there's a savory recipe that requires it.
Nice. I noticed, one of the recipes in the book that intrigued me is you have a homemade Worcestershire sauce, and Worcestershire sauce usually has what's in it that vegans don't?
Anchovies.
Anchovies. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, when I was making the crab loose crab meat side, I realized, oh, this calls for for Worcestershire sauce, and I really wasn't wild about what was on the market. I mean, a lot of people just go that way and they buy a vegan sauce, but there's sugar and there's all sorts of other things in there, and I was all these spice blends and condiments originally were not processed. Home chefs just use their herbs and spices themselves to create these sauces. Many of them originated in India, actually. And so I thought it would be fun to come up with my own Worcestershire, and it worked very well. So there's a recipe for that in there too.
That's very cool. You call yourself a sustainable chef. What does that mean?
Yes. So several years ago, I had been growing so concerned about where climate change was taking us, and watching especially the food traditions, all these people, home cooks from all over the world. I feel so connected to them emotionally because of the wealth of beautiful recipes that I've drawn from inspiration from them. And here and there, the planet has been overheating, fires, floods, hurricanes, drought, the whole gamut. I decided I really wanted to understand that issue because I felt so ill-equipped. And from the perspective of cooking, from the home cook's perspective, looking at it with the food lens, what was the relationship? Because no one was talking about it much several years ago. And it turns out that there is an enormous connection between food, the food systems, and climate change. And there's a great deal that we as individuals can do to really bring down greenhouse gas emissions. People say to me all the time when we talk about this issue, it's like, oh, climate change, oh, it's so depressing. What can I possibly do? And it's very disempowering, but it turns out there is a lot we can do, and it's really delicious, and it's not difficult, and it starts with our forks.
Nice. Well, how the recipe you're making, is it a complicated recipe? How long does it?
No, it's I've done a couple of things ahead of time just because I know our time here is limited. This is a wonderful recipe out of Palestine and that part of the Levant in the Middle East, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Palestine, that whole region. It's a traditional dish. It's called menazele, which sounds like an endearment to my ear. And it's an eggplant chickpea stew. It's very, very simple. It's often vegetarian, even in its native lands, although occasionally it has been served with lamb or with chicken, but you certainly don't need animal products for this delicious recipe. And if you want, I can get started if you'd like me to give it a
That, that
whirl.
that would be great. I see this beautiful pan on your stove, and where my brain goes is the first question is, can you make it in an Instant Pot?
I don't see why you couldn't. It's so simple. It's just we're really just going to saute some vegetables and and just let them simmer in the sauce. So there's no reason why it's not like a lengthy stew. I'm not cooking my chickpeas in there. I suppose if you wanted to cook your chickpeas in your Instant Pot, you could then remove them, do the saute to bring up those onion sugars to flavor the sauce and everything. So and then put the chickpeas back in it. So yeah, I think there's no reason why not.
Do you enjoy using tools like an Instant Pot or an air fryer, or do you like to do everything kind of on the stove?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't have an Instant Pot because I have a pressure cooker for those situations that I need. If I'm cooking soybeans, for example, that could take a long time, or some grains that maybe just really require a lot of time to cook. I'll use the pressure cooker, but otherwise I'm pretty much. I do have an air fryer too. I don't know if you can see it in my handy little. This is a wonderful cabinet. I have a Breville air fryer convection oven here that I use for my air frying as well. And it's wonderful when I'm doing my chickless nuggets, which is sort of you can do it with tofu or many other grains as well, where I'm doing little, instead of chicken nuggets, I'm doing other kinds of nuggets in a little herbal mix that's very tasty. But yeah, I use that for air frying, and it's or even a convection oven. This stove has a double fan convection, and it works very much like an air fryer. So even a full-sized oven, it does an excellent job. But
Nice.
sure, I'm not a Luddite. There are definitely tools that make our lives a little faster and easier.
You had submitted the name of the recipe, and I said, I don't know if anybody's going to know what that is. So we called it Middle Eastern chickpea stew. But what is the official name?
Manazale, and that's yeah, that's what it is. So let me do this, and then as it's cooking, we'll have more time and for questions about the climate, what to eat for the climate, how can we do right by the climate, and I can flip through the book, show pictures of some of the dishes in here. So we should have time to do this. I'm just going to move this out of the way.
Sounds perfect.
So let me just give you a description of what goes into this dish. It's so simple. We have yellow onions. So just, we'll be doing that for our foundation, and we'll be sauteing them without oil. And then I'm going to be adding some minced garlic. If I have to deglaze the pan, because the onions have begun to stick at some point, you can use any kind of deglazing liquid you like. You can use broth, you can use a liqueur from steaming vegetables, you can use a little white wine or vermouth. It's up to you. We're just going to use ever so little, just a couple of tablespoons. So I'm going to start heating up my pan, just because I want this to just get for 2 or 3 minutes, just to heat up as I'm talking about what else going in there. Then I'm just going to be using either whole tomatoes or chopped tomatoes. These happen to be pomi, which I like because it's no BPA lining and so forth. That's it. You know what pomi is? It's
Yeah, it's just tomatoes in a box,
just
right?
tomatoes, no calcium chloride, no preservatives of any sort. It's just very simple. But you can use your favorite tomatoes canned. You could even use fresh tomatoes, but it will take longer. So it's up to you. Chickpeas, this would be the equivalent of about 2 cans of chickpeas. I made these from scratch, and let me just talk for a minute for how to do that when you want to cook, because you can infuse more flavor into your beans and your chickpeas when you do them from dried state. So you can either soak them overnight, or you can just submerge them in water, bring it to a boil for 2 or 3 minutes, turn it off and let them steep for a half an hour to an hour, depending on the age of the legume. Some take more, some take less, but usually even a half an hour is sufficient. When they sink in the pot, then you can add a little more water or change the water. I throw in some herbs. I throw in a little bouquet garni of sage and rosemary wrapped up in cheesecloth, and some garlic, whole garlic cloves, and just let them cook for an additional half hour, whatever they need to just become you don't want them dissolving, but you want them to be tender. And that's the state we're in. Here are my little chickpeas that I did this morning. And then the other thing it's the eggplant, of course. So in the traditional manazale recipe, eggplant is cooked in an abundant amount of olive oil, which of course we don't want to do. So instead, for this recipe, what I like to do is I simply roast them in parchment paper in the oven, which I just did a little while ago. And so I have 2 trays. This is about, I'm trying to remember it's about 2 pounds, maybe a little bit more of eggplant. I'm going to show you in a second. I do that in a 400-degree oven, or 375 if it's convection. And I'm just cooking them so that they're soft and they're nicely brown. You don't want them all dried out, but when they're pierced easily with a fork. I think in the cookbook I said it could take about an hour, but frankly, when you cut them up into little batons like this, it really only took 40 minutes in this oven. But every oven is different. So you can just, open a little bit of the bag, poke a little knife in there, see how soft they are. And we'll add them when we add the chickpeas. And then we're almost done. And I'm gonna, let me see if my pan is hot enough. I'm just gonna spritz it. And so we're using all our senses when we're cooking, right? We're not just our nose and our taste, but our ears as well. Yeah, and so when we get little dancing bubbles, and it's certainly hot enough, because what I want to do, I don't want to burn the oven of the onions, but I want them to caramelize. And to do that, it's sort of a sweet spot. It's not too low, it's not too high. And you just pay attention if it looks like it's beginning to stick right off at the get-go, lower your flame a little.
What kind of pan is that? That looks like a fabulous pan.
This is a Viking. I shop for when I shop for cookware, I do it based on what's on sale. You don't have to pay full retail for wonderful pans. Just keep an eye out, whether it's all clad or demaillé or there's just so many of them. Viking, like this one, you just keep it out. You want a pan that has it's triple clad or even more, just so that it distributes the heat well and you don't get burn marks with some food cooking too fast and some not cooking at all. So this is a great saute pan when you need this for this sort of dish. You could use a big skillet. The shape for this dish is flexible. So you can see, or maybe you can't see. I'll bring it up to the pan in a second. It's nice. They're beginning to, raise the flame a little bit. Oops.
What size is that pan? Because it looks like almost like.
Yeah, this is big. This is do I have a ruler? I think this is a 14-inch pan. So yeah, it will take that. I mean, it's not going to fill it to the brim, but I'd rather use a slightly bigger one than so I can really toss the food around. So we're almost done. And what really brings this recipe to life is a second element, which is just it's in the cookbook as well. It's a spice blend. And a lot of my cooking, what really is exciting for regional differences are the local herbs and spices that a dish originated in that we can easily replicate from our homes today because everything is available. We live in such a lucky time from a culinary perspective. And this spice blend is very popular in the Middle East and North Africa. It's called baharat. You can buy it if you don't want to make it, but I would advise you not to because this is my baharat, what it looks like, but I'll tell you everything that goes into it because this is what makes this dish sing. And you can use it not just in manazale, you can use baharat in so many other, on potatoes, on whole grains, and so many other stews. If you just are cooking something up and it's just not exciting, baharat, this particular, every region has their own interpretation. Probably every family does. This particular one was inspired by the Tunisian version of baharat, which is where it originated. Okay, so this is just to show you. I'm now at a point where I think I'm going to deglaze the pan. The onions are browning, and the pan is beginning to, you can see it's dark on the pan in places. And that's the onion sugars that are now leaving the onion and going to the pan. And so I'm going to just use a little of my liquid, just a teaspoon at a time, because I don't want to drown this. Otherwise, I'll be steaming all my vegetables and they'll all turn gray. And that's the mistake many people make in their plant-based cooking. They figure, oh my God, I'm not cooking with oil. I got to use something or else things will burn. Well, they don't realize how much water is really in onions and other vegetables as well. And so it takes a lot for an onion to burn. So just ever so much, just to loosen up those sugars. We can always add more if we need to. I'm going to add my garlic. There's a fair amount of garlic here. So that was 2 onions. This is 6 nice plump cloves of garlic. And just stir that. And then just let this cook for just a minute tops, because onion will, unlike a garlic will burn, unlike onions. They don't have much water in them. It's a lovely aroma. Okay,
do you
in
cook,
go my tomatoes. Sorry, go ahead.
Do you cook a fancy dinner like this every night?
No, you know, it depends what my week is looking like and what else is going on. I have so many, I have a long list of recipes I can't wait to sort of play with. And I also am inspired by what I see around me. So I do shop locally and see what's in the shops and inspires me to try something new. But so it differs. But often in my life, I'll make a big pot of something once or twice a week, and it's just the 2 of us at home at this point. You know, we don't need a tremendous amount of volume, so we'll nurse a dish for a day or 2, and then I'll do something else. How about you? What do you end up doing?
Oh, I do a lot of batch cooking, you know, so
Yeah,
I just
exactly.
pull
Batch
things
cooking.
out, you know, and I eat pretty simply, but when I see something like this, I'm like, wow, that looks really good.
Yeah, this is very easy. I mean, what am I, you know, I've hardly done anything. So this is going to cook for about 10 minutes. We'll just let this, I'm going to lower the flame a little, and I think I'll cover it, although you don't really have to, but I think I will to speed things along and keep it from evaporating too much. So I just want to keep it at a simmer. And in about 10 minutes, we'll add the chickpeas and the eggplant. Another 10 minutes, we'll season it up and we're done. So it's really pretty simple. So let me talk about Baharat, because we have a couple of minutes. And then we'll talk more about eating for the planet, because that's the main message I'm hoping people will take away, and that the cookbook can help inspire them to lower their food waste as well. So I'll just tell you that because when I was doing research for this book, it sort of blew my mind that 1/3 of all the greenhouse gases that the world produces that get trapped in our atmosphere and cause the planet to overheat, over a third of them come from food alone, just that. And of those foods, 3/4 of those greenhouse gases come from animal agriculture. So, you know, unsurprisingly, the main culprits are ruminant animals like beef cattle, dairy cattle, lamb and mutton, and then it goes down the pecking order to other animals, fish, farm fish, poultry, pork, and so forth. Highly processed foods are pretty up there too. And for the most part, the lowest emitting foods that are the most beneficial for the climate are the simple fruits of the earth that we rely on mostly as plant-based folks. Our whole grains, our legumes, our vegetables, our fruits, our nuts, our seeds, our chilies, our mushrooms, they're like nil. In the case of the trees, the nut trees, even though they use water, in the case of, you know, but they're carbon sinks as well. So they actually are even more beneficial. But it's not all plant foods. There are some plant foods that are not grown sustainably. And so they rise up on that list of emitting culprits that are problematic. Coffee and chocolate are like way up at the top of that list, unfortunately, because so much deforestation is required, or not required, but it's practiced to meet global demand. And so in the book, I detail how to source cacao, for example, so that you're finding sustainable products, because they are grown in some areas in ways that are very climate friendly. It's just many times they're not. And there are some other surprises in there. Rice emits methane when it's flooded on the fields, and so rice, of all the whole grains, that methane is a highly polluting greenhouse gas, many times more than carbon dioxide. And so, there are now new ways of cultivating rice that are being explored, different varieties of rice and also different growing methods that will help. But all of us will begin to see packaging emerging already. I saw it on my Pommi package today, touting all the climate benefits that their product has. And so just be aware that a lot of that is greenwashing as well. There are sources like the one I used for the cookbook, a wonderful Swedish platform called carboncloud.com, where you can look up just about every product you might use, or every fruit and vegetable by country, and find out, how sustainably grown is it. So you kind of know where, am I working with a product that's problematic for the planet or not? We need to become a little more aware and educated as shoppers, because some growing practices are really harmful for the planet. The main ones that drive climate change in agriculture is how the land is used. How many trees are they being deforested, swaths of virgin forest being sacrificed, or wetlands being drained to make room for development, or for agriculture, or for cropland for livestock. So that's a huge driver. Agricultural practices are major because they're all still the energy source is fossil fuels. So pesticide use, fertilizer use, irrigation, farm equipment, all of those inputs, depending on, most of them are not sustainable, and some crops are very heavy users of energy. And lastly, food waste. That's the other huge driver. A third, and there was one report I saw out of the UN that went up to 50% of all the food that we produce is wasted. It never even makes it to individuals and to use. So in the cookbook, there's, our role in food waste is one part of the puzzle, and it starts with where it's cultivated. It ends up in the landfill. There are lots of the supply chain is lengthy, but still we have a role to play. And so in the cookbook, there are several recipes and ideas to really think creatively about repurposing our food so that we're not wasting it, the parts of food that we normally toss.
We have a couple of questions, if you don't mind. One of them from a viewer is, where did you learn a DRUZE, a Druze recipe? And also, where did you learn so much about foreign foods?
I'm not from any school. It's just my own curiosity and passion has, if I sense there's a recipe or a tradition that I want to explore, I take a deep dive into it. And the internet, let's face it, I've watched so many YouTube videos in languages that I cannot understand a word of. And yet, you can really divine an awful lot about how dishes are put together and what they're comprised of. So yeah, that's for Menazale. And sometimes I'll spend a week or more exploring Peruvian dishes or Bangladeshi dishes, or whatever, because almost every agrarian tradition is plant-based at its roots. As these countries have become more affluent, they've added a lot more meat to it. But even a couple of generations ago, meat was just so expensive, so precious, It was not a daily affair. It wasn't even a weekly affair. It was to sacrifice an animal on a farm it was usually a big deal and sparingly used. But sadly, that's not where we're at right now. And that's probably where we're headed, though, back, because that's really what we're pushing the climate and all its ecosystems to the brink right now. If we think the climate is warm now, we're nearing, the temperatures keep going up, fossil fuel use is rising still, and we're facing what they call, some tipping points, some points in the climate system which may not be reversible if they're exceeded. So there's some urgency for eating for the planet, I think, that we all need to take seriously and to do what we can, because action is the only solution to eco anxiety that I know of, is just getting involved, doing what we can within our own homes and our own communities to protect the planet.
Thank you. Here's a question from Shirley Ann. My husband cannot eat eggplant. Would portobello mushrooms and or zucchini be a good substitute?
Yeah, that sounds delicious. Yes, absolutely. You can use whatever vegetables, appeal to you. You can make this seasonal. You could add potatoes. You could add, I think the mushrooms sound delicious, and cauliflower would be wonderful. And yeah, it won't be a classic monosyllable, but it will be another stew, and that will be just so healthy and supportive. And if you use or make a baharat, which I'm just going to give you a hint of what my version of baharat is. There are simpler ones and more complex ones out there, I'm sure, but it's fun to do. And once you have, it takes about 15-20 minutes to do, maybe not even 10 minutes, probably more likely, if you have the ingredients, because I'll tell you what I put in my baharat, and then it will last. I keep it in the fridge and it lasts 6 months, 3 months, depending on how quickly you use it, but you'll use it up pretty quickly. It's a wonderful spice blend, this one. Let me lower this a little bit. And before I continue with baharat, I think at this point, I'm just going to pause to add my chickpeas, because we're progressing with this recipe, and that's why it's such an easy recipe. And then I'm going to also just add my eggplants. Okay, give me a second.
Okay, I have a question from Susanna. And that question is, do you have any tips for home cooks to learn how to season food well? She struggles with this if she doesn't have a written recipe.
I find this is a skill that just comes with practice. And once you cook enough of these, it's okay to rely on recipes in the beginning. Eventually you'll absorb just sort of an innate feel for it, to the degree that you won't need to rely on recipes. You can be more creative. It's a little bit like learning a musical instrument. I like to think of it of, in the beginning, when you're taking piano lessons or violin lessons or whatever it is, you're playing scales, you're learning your notes, you're just learning basic things, because you can't really do anything until you have a certain platform of experience under your feet. And then once you do, you can begin to improvise. And so, yeah, I would say, start with those type of, let your own personal taste and it influence you. So if you're attracted to Italian cooking or Chinese cooking or, Danish cooking or whatever it is, if there's a tradition that your family comes from or that just you find inspiring or you enjoy those flavors, start there. And then use the herbs and the spices and the flavor combinations. It's not that complicated, but there are certain things that just go well together. and that, or Indian cooking is, if you want to learn about herbs and spices, you can't do better than Morocco or India because, or Persia, because they are so rich in their, with their use of seasonings and their, so it's a matter of personal taste. I don't know if that answers the questions.
Yeah.
I think it just comes. It comes just with a little patience, a little time, and you'll find that you'll get there. I'm looking at my stew, and my manasole, this particular one, looks a little bit on the dry side. So I think I made a little extra chickpeas and I had extra eggplant. So I'm going to add a little more tomatoes right here. Bear with me. I have some left over, and I'm just going to add a little bit more because I'd like it to be not a dry, I don't want it to be too dry. So, and here's a little hint. Every time you open a package, like I did with my pommes tomatoes, or with any leftovers that you have, whether it's a raw ingredient or cooked, label it with the date, because if your refrigerator is like my refrigerator, after a couple of days and a couple of dishes, things just end up in the back of the fridge, and it's very easy to neglect it. And before you know it, it's too late and it's spoiled. So, so that's just a way for you to keep tabs on it when I make a mayonnaise or when I cook beans or anything. A lot of plant-based dishes are good for 5 days, maybe a day or two more, depending on what its nature is. And then after that, it bacterial, microbial growth, takes hold, and it's not really safe to eat or taste good. So just a little hint. Okay, I'm going to cover this again. Let this just cook for a couple of minutes. Go back to my baharat. So sorry about the interruption. So this is such a great spice blend because it's got everything. It's just such an interesting amalgam of seasonings. We've got sweet spices, like we have cloves, we've got green cardamom. This is Ceylon cinnamon, whoops, wrapped up in here. So I buy this online. It's different than what is normally sold as cinnamon today. So it behooves you to get Ceylon because it's a very different flavor. It looks similar. It's much softer than cassia, which is Chinese or Vietnamese or the other type of cinnamon. This is Ceylon, and it's easy to break with your hands. That's you can just snap it into smaller pieces, which you cannot do with cassia. And the flavor is not nearly as harsh. And it actually has benefits for blood sugar and other things, I'm told. But I'm mostly doing it for the flavor. So what other sweet spices? Let's see. We've got also allspice. So those are some of the sweet spices. We've got mint, dried mint. And so I use tea bags. You can use spearmint or peppermint. These are my peppermint bags. And just each bag has about a teaspoon, so it's perfect. And then we have some savory spices. We've got black peppercorn. There's some heat there. Cumin seed, coriander, dried ginger, paprika, whether it's sweet or smoked. I use smoked in my case, but you could also don't have to. Rose petals. So this is something you'll find in Persian cooking and a lot of North African cooking as well, and Indian cooking as well. From South Asia is cooking with food grade rose petals. So it's so aromatic and floral, but it's also got a little heat. It's gentle heat in this case. Oh, nutmeg. Lots of nutmeg. There's a whole teaspoon of nutmeg in this amount of baharat. And did I say ginger? I think I did. I think that's it, except for the chilies. So the chilies that I'm using, they could be Aleppo chilies out of Syria. These are from Kashmir. And Kashmir and Aleppo, they're different flavors. Dried chilies are fantastic to work with because they have so much flavor, and all of these spices are powerful nutritionally. They really bring down inflammation in your body, even though we're using tiny amounts of them. And these are Kashmiri and Aleppo are very mild. They're very, very mild. This is not a cayenne or a habanero or hot chilies. These are very mild. So there are several of them that go in the blend. And the recipe you'll see in the cookbook some of these spices will get heated just for a minute, literally just for a minute till they're aromatic, not any longer. We don't want to burn them. And then they get ground in a little coffee grinder or spice grinder, and then the rest of the spices get ground in as well. And that's all there is to Baharat. You have the ingredients, and not all of them involve all of these ingredients, but I particularly like this blend. When you buy Baharat pre-made, the risk there is that you really, number one, once spices are ground, they start to degrade very quickly. They're volatile oils, natural oils, evaporate. And so if you were to taste or to smell a fresh Baharat versus something else that's been sitting on the shelf, there'll be a world of difference. And that is not only for flavor, but also for nutritional value. But even more importantly, spices, the whole spice market has so many middlemen. You will be spending a fortune buying a pre-blended spice blend versus buying the raw materials and making your own. And when they're unground, they'll last an eternity. Once they're ground, as I said, they'll start to degrade. And you really don't know, frankly, what's in, how adulterated is it? Because not all blends are as pure as they pretend to be. So it's a little riskier that way as well. So it's a variety of reasons I like to make my own.
Thank you. Do you teach cooking anywhere, and is it in person or virtual?
I do both. If people are interested, they can contact me. Cathy's Kitchen Prescription is my website. And anybody is welcome if they want to set up a little virtual program for their group. I'm happy to help. I work with local folks, who want a cooking class at home and so forth. And I just did a class in my local VNA. So, I'll travel around based on, yeah, I used to do them out of my house, but I no longer am doing that.
That's fantastic. Where do people follow you? Would you like them to get the book?
The book is available everywhere. So it's only out about a week now. So it's just had its birthday. And but you can find it on Amazon, on Barnes and Noble, Simon and Schuster, and your local bookstore can order it if they don't have it. So it's easy to find. And if anybody, I have events coming up. If you sign up for my newsletter or whatever, or even just go to my website, there's an events page, and I have to update it because, especially with the launch of a book, there's a whole flurry of publicity things that one does. I'll be doing some live events. I have, for people that are local in Connecticut, I'm giving a little talk next Tuesday at our local library. And then I have an event up in the Catskills on the following Saturday, and other things in the area. I'll be doing something in Westport in December, and there are a bunch of them, but some online as well. So if you have a group that wants a cooking class or wants to know more about sustainability and how to eat for the planet, I'm happy to help. Just reach out.
Great. TS would like to know, do you recommend buying whole spices and then grinding them as needed?
Yes, indeed. That's in my cookbook, it's like a motto I repeat infinitely. But yes, so much better for us, so much fresher. Just make what you will use in a month or two, and the whole spices will last forever, and so they can be much healthier, much fresher. And it's, a little coffee grinder. It takes 2 seconds to grind your spices up. So I heartily recommend that over the, having pre-ground spices that just accumulate dust and then lose all their potency and flavor and health benefits too.
Thank you. How are you going to serve that? Like maybe over a whole grain or just
Yeah, so menazale, so let me just I'm gonna take it one more step forward. So and then I'm gonna serve it up to you. But yeah, this is wonderful with a crusty whole grain bread. Or you could have a pilaf on the side or just a whole grain. So yeah, it's like any stew. It just something to go with would be nice. I'm going to turn off the flame at this point. It's really done. Oh no, it's not done. Sorry. I forgot to add my baharat. Hang on a sec. After talking all about it. So this recipe, and then it just needs to cook for another couple of minutes. This recipe, this amount, a good 2 tablespoons. And then, start there. And if you find you want a little more flavor, a little more heat, you can add more. It's such an interesting blend of flavors from savory to heat and just really lovely. Sweet smelling, maybe that's the roses or the ginger, I'm not sure, but it's just really yum. So we're going to let this cook just for another minute or two. But it's our dinner for tonight. And I'm going to season it right now. I'm going to add, just in the final minute or two, is a good amount of parsley. So for those of you who grew up in Italy or have Italian relatives, you might be familiar with a mezzaluna. This is a really simple hand tool that works wonderfully when you have to quickly reduce. You can use a chef knife, of course, as well, but either will work. But it's even faster with a mezzaluna. And mezzalunas, which means half moon in Italian, are terrific. There are a lot of Italian recipes, for example, that combine garlic with parsley. And you can put them right on the board and just mince, chop them up together. The blade should be sharp and it doesn't crush, unlike a little food processor or anything like that, which would end up making, it tends to crush our delicate herbs or it's difficult to control how far you want to go, but with the mezzaluna, it just sharply cuts them, and you can go as coarse or as fine as you want. And literally, this takes like 1 minute to reduce whole leaves to, to something like this. And I'm going to add most of them right in the pot right now. I'm going to save a little as for a garnish. And yeah, the only other part to this dish is simply seasoning it with miso. And the miso that I'm using for menazale is aka miso. It's the red miso paste. Here's a little jar of it. Any brand that you find is fine. I made a little mess on my counter here, so let me just get rid of that. What I like to do for this dish, miso is a live probiotic food. So when we have control like this in a stew, we really don't want to cook it, because over a live or a flame, it will get too hot, and the live microbes within the miso won't survive, and we want them because that's where the probiotic benefits are. So the best way to season with miso is to turn off your flame once you're done cooking. And if you're going to eat the whole amount in a sitting, you can flavor the pot. But if you're not going to do that, then all I would do is dilute your miso, as I have, in a certain amount of water. I think I used about 1/3 of a cup of miso to a 1/2 cup of water, but the consistency is, let's see if I can show you, see if I need to. Yeah, this is, it reduces it from a paste to a soft paste. It's it's not you don't want it watery, but you want it able to dissolve easily. And then I would serve it individually within the bowls. It's at a temperature that you'll still, and you're going to sit down and eat it. And that's how the Japanese, in their miso soups and their other recipes that might use miso, will do it at the very end of cooking so that they're not cooking their miso. And so to serve, I'll just plate it for you. Now, if this is, of course, this would be entirely, if I was doing, if I had a starch or something, not bread, I would add it underneath. And I would add my little bit, a couple of teaspoons is probably, you can do it by taste and you'll get a feel for miso. Let me just use a spoon to combine it. And that just brings it, completes, rounds out all the flavors, and you get the benefit of the miso as well. It's so fragrant and it's so pretty. Let's see if I can get some more of the juices here. Anybody have any other questions?
Yeah, we have a few questions, and mine is, why do they make chef coats white?
The
It's
one thing about chef coats, though, is just like a good apron. They do, I don't know what kind of material they are, but they don't stain. They're just so resilient.
Oh, I could disagree with the one I have, but yours looks crisp and beautiful. So a couple of questions. Regina would like to know why you don't cook the spices with the onion.
Because in this spice blend, we're actually adding the spices fairly late in the game. Sometimes with some recipes, you'll find this a lot with Indian recipes, you'll add some spices early and then again, a second round of them towards the end. But because you also want them to be potent enough to really survive, because in the dish themselves, they'll flavor the dish, but they'll also dissipate to such an extent you won't get the intensity that I'm looking for. There's nothing uncooked about these spices, so it's not like they have to cook. It's just, it really depends on the dish. Sometimes we do add them earlier on. Sometimes we add them early and later. And with menazale, I favor just adding the spice after the chickpeas and the eggplant get added. But it's a good question. I mean, because you will find different dishes relying on different amounts of spice at different points in the game. So here we go. So I don't know if you can see, but anyway, there's our menazale.
Oh my God, that looks scrumptious. That looks amazing. You're gonna have a great dinner. That is
it's hearty, it's flavorful, it's so nutrient dense, there's no oil. So you could go back for seconds or more, if you want. It's just it's a lovely, easy recipe, and it's one of many in the book. So I want people to eat wide. It's good for the climate because we diversify the foods that we grow, and it takes pressure off of it helps farmers have more resiliency in when crops fail, as they increasingly are. They can diversify their fields, but it's also great for our gut microbiome, because the wider we eat, the more different foods, different spices, different seasonings, the more resilient our little eco-forest in our own intestines are as well. So it's good for us both.
Thank you. We have time for a few more questions, and one of them from Mona is about cardamom. What's the difference between green and regular?
Yeah, well, green is regular. I mean, green is the most common. Let me see if I can pull out my green and black cardamom, because they are two totally different animals. What I used here are the seeds inside of green cardamom. So hang on. I have a crazy spice cabinet here, so it's just enormous. So let's see if I can find them all quickly. Okay, they're all alphabetical, so we just have to grab the right one. This one. Yes. Okay. So cardamom is wonderful. It's a sweet spice, so to speak, but so this is how green cardamom seeds are. And there are some recipes that will use them intact with their seed coats on them, just like this. Because it will dissolve in the cooking, and it depends what you're making, but sometimes it's called for. But more often, because this is a little bit woody, this green coating, and it takes a long time to break down. The seeds inside of those green cardamoms are these. If you can see, they're tiny little dark seeds that are very fragrant, but they're intact. But that's what they come out of. Instead, in African dishes and some Indian dishes, you'll find black cardamom called for. Black cardamom is it's a cousin, but the flavor profile is very different. They're much bigger and it's smoky. I wouldn't describe it as sweet. It's really a whole different flavor profile in black cardamom. So those are the two cardamoms that I'm familiar with. I don't know if there are any others, but they're quite different uses and quite different flavors.
Thank you. And there's a question about, does your website list different sources for spices that you like and don't put things like lead with the spices?
Well, that's why the benefit of buying your spices whole, then you can avoid heavy metal contamination. So that's what I was alluding to before. It's really difficult to know what you're getting. Basically, and I talk about this in the book, it's not on my website because there is no one source for spices. It really depends what spice you're looking at. But in general, you want to go as close to the growers as you can. And in other words, try to get sustainably grown whole spices from a good source. And you'll, a lot of them, there are now certifications of different source. So there's no child labor being used, and they're grown sustainably and so forth. So you just have to do a little bit of research, just looking for brands as you go. But in general, from a health perspective, whole is the way to go, because you cannot contaminate whole spices. It would be obvious if they were contaminated with non-food or other foods that don't belong there, and certainly heavy metals.
And there's a question if there's a pizza recipe in the book, and what's your favorite recipe in the book, and can you show some of the photos?
Yeah, so pizza, my first cookbook has a za'atar pizza in it. I remember in that cookbook, I have, recipes for a lot of bread recipes also in both cookbooks. So let me show you let me just go grab the first book, because there might be some things in that.
While she's getting her book, I just want to thank everyone for watching. If you like what you see, maybe subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and come back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific time for The Doctor Is In Q&A with Dr. Ron Weiss.
This is Love the Foods That Love You Back. So this has the za'atar pizza in it, and a lot of sourdough and other interesting bread recipes. In this one, let's see what I have in my, see what I can pull up here. So I have a lot of bread and crackers. So just, I got raisin crisps and apple raisin crepes and korny chleb, which is Ukrainian black bread, which is a sourdough bread, cornbread, naked brot, which is a really, let's see if I can find. So this is, see if I can, this is a barley bread. So I'm trying to expose people. There are a lot of flatbreads as well as regular yeasted, typical breads. This is rugbrot, which is a Danish rye bread. That's also sourdough, but some of them are not yeasted. They're simple and a lot faster. This is a great Persian bread, sangat. It's baked on pebbles. It's a it's a Persian recipe that has a whole story and history to it. But then I have simple crackers made. This is seasoned with corn and potatoes and amaranth. So, I want people to get exposed to all these alternative whole grains. So we're not just eating wheat, corn, and rice, which and we're giving not only for the planet, but also for us for the same reasons, to really give diversity for our health. This is a wonderful flatbread out of Sweden called knäckebröd, which you roll with an interesting rolling pin. It's paper thin and it hangs up, and they would use it over their all winter long. But they're wonderful. Here's a West African recipe for a stew made with black-eyed peas and okra. I'll just see what I'm opening to, and just to give you idea, we've got stir-fried, so you can learn some classic Chinese techniques as well. You can really eat the world, and that's what I intend to do. And I hope I can inspire you as well, with some, some of the recipes are celebratory. They're a little more for parties. Some are very simple and quick for everyday meals. There are wonderful salads in here. Salads should not be humdrum. They're just cold dishes.
That is beautiful. The photography is just beautiful.
Thanks. That's Giordano. This one, I love it this season. We're coming up to cold weather, at least where I am. And this is with grapefruit and beets and arugula and radishes, and it's got shallots and a little bit of dill and pistachio nuts. And the little white dots that you see across the top is made from soy yogurt. It's like a little labneh, just strained soy yogurt, which makes a kind of soy cheese, which is delicious. This is again, excuse me, these are Turkish. These are just made from yogurt, from soy. You can make homemade soy yogurt and then just strain it. And so they make little balls that you roll in spices and nuts and herbs. There's just so many fun foods to eat. This is crostini with made out of polenta with mushrooms. So, hopefully people will find stuff that they haven't made before that are easy and flavorful, and I can whet your appetite. But it's all, and then there's just lots of advice for reducing our waste stream in the kitchen, like this is soca, fermented farinata made with chickpea flour. This is a wonderful little appetizer. But I was going to show you a soup that is made with asparagus. This is, I call it my recoup soup, because I'm using the woody ends of the asparagus that we normally throw away. So this is one really eco-friendly dish of how to repurpose the parts of vegetables that don't get enough love, like those bottoms of the asparagus or the cores of cauliflower or broccoli, or the ends of collards and kale. They can all be fashioned into a beautiful blended soup that's just so nourishing, and the nutrition is just as good as the leaves. They just, it's just habit that we don't use all of the whole vegetable, and so this is a way to reuse them in a really fun way. And there are croutons here that you can use stale bread, but I show people how to make crispy croutons out of leftover whatever. So I did this for another demo that I did last week, where I made my croutons out of the crumbs from shredded wheat, in the box that if you occasionally have cold cereal and shredded wheat is like 1/3 of the box ends up being crumbles, and you can reuse those in just wonderful ways, like croutons.
Well, Cathy, I wish you every success with the book. It's absolutely beautiful.
Thank you, HA. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Reach out if you have any questions. I hope you enjoy the new book. I hope you took away a little new learning today about how we can eat to help our planet. So
Well,
thank
thank
you
you so
all.
much and enjoy your meal.
Thanks a lot.
Yep. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ and Friends. Please come back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific time for The Doctor is In, where Dr. Ron Weiss answers your questions. Take care.